Hello there, everyone. This is Aaron St. Dennis, the FF Mad Scientist, and welcome back to the Mad Science Lab podcast. Today, we're continuing on with the My Tiers series, and here to break down rookie running backs is Emerson Beery. Emerson, thanks for joining me. Nice to have you back.
Thank you for having me back on, my friend. That Breaking Bad intro, is like a shot of espresso in the morning, and I need it after a long weekend of bartending. But yes, very excited to be here.
I learned yesterday that I know you more by your real life profession than I do by your sleeper name. I always say this. I want to come up with a standard rule where whatever your Twitter handle is needs to be your sleeper handle. Because I sent you the invite to the Player Profiler Championship, and I'm going, who the fuck is this cocktail hour or whatever? And then right when you said it's your favorite bartender, I'm like, oh, it's Emerson. I had no clue who you were. And the other guy, I'm sitting there going, I'm like, it's not Frank Gore. Who the hell's name is Frank Gore? So it was Chris, but I hate that.
Very, very quick story. My sleeper handle's name is Johnny Cocktail, and that name comes from the fact that I remember I was back in college. One of my roommates Johnny Manziel was still in the league at that point, and one of my roommates comes out. They talking about Johnny Cocktail out there? So I love that name, Johnny Football to Johnny Cocktail, and I've kept it ever since. My sleeper, if you look at my little picture, it's a picture of Manziel with the the fireworks coming out of his mouth, hilarious. And he's like flexing. So
that is hilarious. I have a couple where it's league like analyst leagues just for networking, and I'm going, dude, we're trying to network here. Why don't you have like the same? I had one where I was trying to book a podcast guest and he's messaging me on Sleeper. And then I've got somebody else messaging me on Twitter. And so he goes, okay, so 10 o'clock, right? And I respond, yes. And then the other one, he goes on Twitter, he goes, okay, so 10 o'clock, right? And I said, no, I've got someone booked. It's the same guy messaging me in two different accounts on Tuesday. I'm going, change your shit to line up. So, but all right, that's enough of my rant on the names. I guess let's get into it. I'll let you start off here with B. Is that B? Yeah, it is Bijan. I seen orange and I didn't zoom in. I said, is that Bijan or Roshan? But it is Bijan. Where do you have Bijan? As if I didn't know. And what do you think about him?
Yeah, I have him as below. No, I'm just kidding. No, how about the elite tier? Obviously, one of the best running back prospects in the last decade. If we were just ranking him over the last 10 years, you're probably looking at Saquon Barkley, Ezekiel Elliott, then Bijan Robinson. 104 forced tackles missed were the most since the stats been recorded. Just absolutely insane profile. Has everything you're looking for. Not quite the athlete that Saquon Barkley was coming out, but has almost every other tool that you're looking for. Already the dynasty RB1. Regardless, including all the veterans too.
Yeah, I can't argue any of that. He's a pretty standard one. You caught me off at first. I'm like, did he say he? Oh, he was joking. He was joking. Like, wow, he's really low on Bijan, but. Now we're going to have to break out my sheet here because this damn tier maker doesn't zoom in enough. So that would be Chase Brown coming up next. The Cincy running back. He is going he's going way too high right now. They're not getting rid of Mixon. Mixon's going to be on the team. He's a backup, and he had the worst Senior Bowl I've ever seen.
All right, and just to be clear, I'm putting these in categories of just how I feel about him. Not, like you said, Chase Brown's going way too high in ADP. Am I factoring in that ADP, or am I just giving you what I think about him as a prospect?
Yeah, I would just say go based on what you think about him as a prospect. Okay. Like I said, I'm lower than consensus on him for that reason. I didn't like him to begin with all that much, but.
So. Yeah, he had that disastrous Senior Bowl, and I have him as a below average in the below average tier. Had that disastrous Senior Bowl, some fumbling issues, but was very productive in the Big Ten. Has a lot of straight line speed, but yes, I think it's being a little bit overblown. He has a shot at being, I guess, the number 2 running back in Cincinnati, but I don't think he's a threat to usurp any touches from Mixon, and I really do expect him to probably be behind Travion Williams even in the pecking order too. So, I think he's more of just a long shot number, not somebody that I would ever even push into the second round of rookie drafts, which I've seen him go in a couple of them.
I've seen him go early second. Like he's being drafted, even in dynasty startups. He's being drafted like he's just the assumed starter in Cincy this year, and he's not going to be. Even if they cut Mixon, I don't think he's the assumed starter. But I don't know. Maybe I'm just not high enough on him. But moving on, we have Chris Rodriguez, who was an interesting selection by the Commanders, seeing as how he's basically a clone of Brian Robinson. They do the same thing in the same efficiency level.
I believe that the Washington Commanders said that they had a third round grade on Chris Rodriguez, is what was that quote was. Not a player that jumped out to me on tape. I didn't like him very much. He wasn't close to my top. I don't think I had him in my top 15 running backs in the pre-draft process.
Nope.
There is certainly, there's you can make up a story in your head where he ends up getting some touches this season, but I don't really anticipate it. I still think it's Brian Robinson, Antonio Gibson's backfield to split. So he is, I honestly, I have him in bad tier. I just, when I was looking at tape, I didn't like what I saw, and I just didn't see a future productive fantasy player. So
yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I don't see a whole lot there. Next up, we have the Mighty Mouse, Deuce Vaughn.
Deuce Vaughn, he's a fun prospect. He's in the below average tier, unfortunately, but that's not because he wasn't fantastic in college. He had over 1,900 all-purpose yards last season. Do it all. I mean, he was a workhorse in college despite his size. But even Darren Sproles makes him look small. So
yeah.
there's just really not. There's just not an avenue where he could be a consistent fantasy relevant player. Very smart. Good receiver. He does everything very well, but just he's very, very small, and we know that opportunity is the biggest thing for running backs.
He's really fun to watch, but realistically, he probably would be best served as a kick returner, and that's about it. But Devon Achane,
I have him in the average tier, and it's not because I don't really like the player. Former track star, elite speed, 4.32 at the combine. I do believe I don't have it right in front of me, but yeah, I mean, he's really, really exciting in open space. And if you were hand picking a landing spot, I mean, it would probably be the Miami Dolphins with Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle on the outside. You can see him getting some open space. I just like I said, opportunity is the biggest thing for these running backs. There's just not a world where Achane's getting probably 200 or touches plus or anything like that. Probably more of he's going to have to maximize those 8 to 12 touches per game that he's going to get. So, is for fantasy purposes, probably more of a boom bust flex option, just not somebody who I know some people are really excited, not somebody who I'd see as a top 24 running back at any point in his career, though.
People are drafting him like Wilson and Mostert are already hurt and out for the season. I get it, they're old and injury prone, but until they're actually out, he's the number 3 on the depth chart right now. Like, he's not the number 1. I don't get it. The NFL doesn't just cast away the veterans off their team. They re-signed both of them this year, clearly indicating that they like them. Achane could eventually do something, but I don't think he's just going to walk into, the bell cow role here in Miami as a rookie. Next up, Dwayne McBride.
Dwayne McBride, I really liked what I saw in he's one of the best pure rushers in the class, and people talk about, it really is true. He bounces off people. He's very tough to bring down, outstanding contact balance. I think there is an opportunity in Minnesota. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that Alexander Mattison and Tyson Chandler are going to be, I think he could get some touches this year. I think he could usurp them, especially if he's given an opportunity. One of those guys goes down. I really like, he's not somebody who's going to catch a lot of passes or anything on third down, but somebody who's very, like I said, very tough to bring down. You could see him getting some goal line opportunities in a very good offense.
No, I agree. I have him stashed in a few places simply for that reason. I think that, it appears pretty likely that they're going to be moving on from Dalvin Cook. But even when they do, I don't think they're just going to hand this over to Madison full time. I think it's still going to be a committee, whether it ends up being Chandler or McBride or all 3 of them who mix in remains to be seen. But
I would put him in the average tier.
Sorry, I didn't even see that.
I forgot to give it to you too.
I was too busy talking about him to even realize that I hadn't moved him. So next up, we have Eric Gray.
Eric Gray, he has obviously at Oklahoma, he had a lot. He was, had some pass catching experience at Oklahoma. Some people are really, really think, he has a huge opportunity. They already liked him in the pre-draft process. He's not my favorite. I never really saw a guy that was going to be fantasy relevant. So, he's somebody who I had in the bad tier before the draft. I had him, I think, as my RB14 or RB15 in the pre-draft process. I don't know if he's going to, it's just depending on a guy with marginal draft capital to come in and be a pass catching running back. It's very hard for these guys to carve out those consistent roles really like that. So I really don't think it's maybe more of like a Theo Riddick type career where, in PPR leagues, he might give you some weeks where he's scratching 7-8 points like that, but not a lot of upside there, I don't think.
He's a Saquon injury handcuff at best. Evan Hull.
I do like the opportunity for here because, you could see a world where Jonathan Taylor gets injured and he gets a bigger opportunity. Nyheim Hines isn't there. So another guy who is handcuff value. I have him in the below average tier, but I do think I could see him getting a larger role if Jonathan Taylor got injured as opposed to Eric Gray if Saquon Barkley got injured.
Izzy Abanikanda.
This one's tough for me.
Yeah, it's a really messy situation.
I was the guy pumping him up in the pre-draft process. I really liked what I saw, and I thought the NFL would too, but unfortunately he got that 5th round draft capital that sunk that. I was mocking him in the 1st round of rookie drafts. Sadly, that is not going to be the case. I'm not even sure, I lean on draft capital quite a bit because you know what I mean? The guys making the millions of dollars are telling us what they think here. So
yeah.
Is he? I mean, I'm not sure that he's going to beat out Michael Carter in this pecking order. So I have him in the average tier, but probably closer to the below average tier than he is to the good tier for sure. So unfortunately, even though I love the speed, he had over 1,500 rushing yards last year. I don't have the stat right in front of me here, but
I feel like it was 1498 maybe.
Yeah, something like that. I mean, he was fantastic. He had a really good year, and he had like 17 touchdowns too. So an electric athlete. Usually those guys pop up the draft boards, but I'm going to lean, like I said, I'm going to lean on the 5th round draft capital here. So, he's more of like a early 3rd round pick in my eyes.
Yeah, the talent's there, but like you said, between the draft capital and the landing spot, it's just not there. Moving on to someone who got a landing spot and draft capital, Jahmyr Gibbs.
I can finally speak, a little bit more positively. This is a guy who I was shocked who got the number 12 overall draft capital. That was ridiculous. That was not something we were expecting, but the Detroit Lions appeared to kind of throw positional value out the window in the draft.
Yep. There's always that one guy in the draft.
It's a middle linebacker in the 1st round, a tight end in the 2nd round. So interesting decision there. But Jahmyr Gibbs, obviously, they have huge plans for him if they took him number 12 overall. So, I have to, once again, if I'm going to lean on the 5th round draft capital for Abanikanda, I'm going to lean on the number 12 draft capital with Jahmyr Gibbs, already a top 8 dynasty running back in my rankings, and I'm going to put him in the great tier. Not elite tier, the great tier, though.
Fair enough. Next up, we have someone I'm particularly high on, Kendre Miller.
Yeah, the opportunity is certainly there, especially if Alvin Kamara ends up getting suspended. You could see them move on from him as early as next season too. So 2024, he's more of a 2024 pick. But yeah, when I'm sitting there at the 110 in the Superflex draft, that's when I start thinking about taking Kendre Miller. Sometimes I've seen him go all the way into the mid-2nd. So he's a guy with interesting value. Maybe not an immediate return, but I mean, all of a sudden, if Alvin Kamara gets suspended for 6 to 10 games, all he's competing with is Jamal Williams.
You're making me feel terrible. I've got my main work dynasty league where I was loaded up on picks. I think I had 15 picks in the 1st round and a half. And my last pick was the 206. And my decision came down to Jonathan Mingo or Kendre Miller for my last pick of the draft. And I don't know, I was really high on Mingo at the time and went with Mingo. And each day I get further away from the draft, I've regretted going Mingo over Miller more and more. And then to hear you say you were willing to take him at the end of the 1st, I'm going, fuck, why didn't I just take Miller? I overthought it.
I always lean on those running backs, those day 2 running backs, just because it's so hard to make a dent in the wide receiver landscape. You're looking at you look at Zay Flowers, Quentin Johnston. Where do they rank in your dynasty wide receivers? You're looking down. They're probably outside the top 30. They're borderline top 36 wide receivers. You know what I mean? So it's just so deep. So I always lean on the running back who could be a potential difference maker.
Where do you have him?
I have. I'm going to put him in the good tier. Good tier.
Fair enough. Lou Nichols.
This is a guy I don't have a lot on. I haven't researched him significantly yet, and I was going to lean kind of on what I was leaning in training camp. Do you have some initial thoughts? Because I'm curious what
Yeah,
because this was a
let
guy
me
when
do
you
it.
pulled him up.
Let me do it for you. There we go.
He just so that's your no thoughts then. So I shouldn't even bother is
Yeah.
what you're telling me.
No, I did this in my were you on the My Team series or the My Guys? I don't remember. Did you
I don't remember either.
I
So
think you
many
were
of
on the
these.
My Guys, but there were a few where I got through it where some people were really high on other players. And so, and it was like, oh, I don't really know that much on, Evan Hull. So, it was wait till after the draft and maybe I'll add him to my list of players to go back and look at. Lou Nichols has never been someone added to my list of players to go back and look at. I think he came up as RB 15 and rookie running back ADP, so he made the list, but it's just because there's only 15 running backs. So, yeah, nothing to see there. Roshan Johnson.
Roshan Johnson, another very polarizing player, somebody I was bullish on in the pre-draft process. You didn't
Not
get to
as much
see
as
him.
me.
It's not as much as a lot of people.
Oh, that's not true. You work for Player Profiler too, so you might be as high on him as I am. Anytime I talk about him, I just get the, but you're a Player Profiler guy, so that doesn't count.
Yeah, Matt Kelly has a lot of thoughts that permeate through the Player Profiler network. But Roshan Johnson, I was high on him. I'm not as high as some people are on him. So you sound like you're probably higher on him than I am.
RB3 in this class.
Not my RB3. I have him behind Kendre Miller. I have him, and then he becomes a conversation at the RB4, RB5 spot. But I think, you just didn't get to see it in college because he played behind Bijan Robinson. Very tough to bring down, solid, not great athlete, and I think he has both some receiving chops too, especially if this pass blocking gets him out on the field during third down. And I also like the landing spot. I think if you love Roshan Johnson, then Khalil Herbert and Deontay Foreman shouldn't be that intimidating to you. So I think opportunities there. I don't think he's going to be a 2023 asset. I view it as more maybe a latter half of the season. Maybe 2024 is going to be his year. But like I said, when I'm sitting there in the mid-second round, he's an auto pick. If you're getting into the first round draft capital, that's when I start to question it a little bit, though.
Where do you have him?
Ooh, that is the man. I have him in the good tier. I can't put him higher than that. The good tier.
Next up, we have Tank Bigsby.
Tank Bigsby, I have in the average tier. I think he is a first and second down guy, could end up being the goal line role for the Jaguars. However, a pass catching liability, not a lie. I'm sorry, I meant pass blocking liability.
Yeah.
And then at pass catching, he has some chops out there. He's not a guy who's running a really adept routes or anything like that, but he does have good hands. He's capable certainly of going out there and catching some screen passes. I was just on the podcast with one of I am so bad with the names. I was just on a podcast with a fairly well-known analyst, and he was talking to me about how he thinks Tank Bigsby is a better pass-catching running back than Travis Etienne, and how Travis Etienne was totally overblown as a pass-catching prospect coming out of Clemson. So, that was that was a very interesting take to me. I knew that, Travis Etienne hadn't run particularly adept routes or anything at Clemson, more of just a screen catcher. So, I had gone that in, but I hadn't heard that take yet. And I thought that was definitely interesting. So, I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Tank Bigsby falls in line more of just a guy who, a lesser version of Zach Charbonnet, somebody I don't see getting more than 5 to 7, maybe 8 touches per game.
That's funny because I was about to say the exact opposite. As you asked, what do you think? I was going to say I see him as a bigger threat to ETN than I see Charbonnet as a threat to Walker.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think either of them's going to really eat into the work. I just think Bigsby's probably a better all-around back. But I'm a Michigan fan and hated Charbonnet when he was at Michigan, so it could just be bias.
Fair enough. Zach Charbonnet, we're probably about to get into him, I imagine, right? I don't recognize these. Oh, I see him there. He's in the middle.
It's the second one, yeah.
Yep, I see him. Okay. Next up, Tajay Spears, it looks like, right?
It is. What do you think about him?
Ooh, This is the guy, it's very, I'm not that worried about actually the ACL diagnosis, because what are we drafting him really expecting anyway? Probably just a guy that we would love to squeeze value out of for 2 or 3 seasons, maybe, and get some starting weeks out of him. And I think that's still fully capable of doing it. Without an ACL, if that's actually, those reports are accurate, it's going to be tough for him to see a career where he's playing 4 to 5 years down the line, 6 years with 2
Do
significant
we
knee
really
injuries.
get 5 years out of most running backs
Yeah,
though?
exactly. That's
It
what I mean,
doesn't
though. So
matter.
it doesn't matter really. So, he could have some immediate handcuff, value playing behind Derrick Henry, considering his age and workload, could get injured. The wheels could fall off at any moment. So in 2024, you never know how the offense is going to look. He could be walking into a nice little lead role. So somebody I would put in the average tier, but maybe closer to below average than the good tier, but still somebody I'm definitely willing to consider in the back end of the second round of rookie drafts.
I think we end it with 3 running backs I'm not particularly high on. Next up is Zach Charbonnet.
I have Zach Charbonnet in the good tier. I don't love the landing spot, and that drives him down in fantasy value. And there's just not a lot that he does better than Kenneth Walker. Kenneth Walker looked pretty good as a pass catcher out there last
What
season when
tier
he
was
was
that? What tier?
good
Okay.
tier.
Well, I couldn't. Sorry, I misheard you. I think my computer's lagging a bit, and I heard kind of a remix version of it. So, not sure. All right, sorry. Continue.
No, all good. And I just don't see where he gets on the, especially when we see these guys out on the field in practice. I just don't see a scenario where they're looking at many situations where Zach Charbonnet is a better in the offense than Kenneth Walker. So I think he's more just going to spell Kenneth Walker at times. We could see a very run heavy offense. You never know with Geno Smith back there. Last year could have been an anomaly. So I could see a scenario where this becomes a fairly run heavy offense, even with all those players on the outside, the playmakers, the wide receivers. So, is there a world where I can see him giving 10 PPR points or something like that on a week, becoming a flex option? Sure. But there's just not a lot of upside, unfortunately, with Kenneth Walker there, unless there's an injury occurs, which all of a sudden you're looking at a top 12 running back potentially.
I have a ton of shares of Kenneth Walker now. I just think he's all around better than Charbonnet, but I guess I'll see whether I'm right or not. We ended out with maybe my least favorite back in the class, Zach Evans.
Ooh, wow. That's a little hot. I mean, Zach Evans, I have him as in the average tier, but there's some things to like about, Zach Evans, never
the talent is there. He's just the talent is there. Whether it's work ethic or what, he just doesn't have that him factor. He gets beat out by an inferior player pretty much everywhere he goes.
Whoever's at Ole Miss right now is not.
Okay, it's not. Yes, okay. Judkins is not inferior, and I guess Kendre Miller isn't now, but at the time he was.
At the time he was, yeah.
At the time, Judkins was seen as inferior too. Like Evans came out as one of the highest recruited backs in his class going into college, like his freshman year. It's just he keeps being downgraded to the point where he's no longer seen on that profile because he gets beat out everywhere he goes.
He's a very interesting prospect. I've heard a lot of people say that if he wasn't such a I don't like to speculate on this without hearing a lot about it, but you hear knucklehead factor, you know what I mean? Not very high. I imagine a Cody Carpentier's dog rating, that thing.
That's exactly what I mean.
So
he doesn't seem to have the work ethic either.
So there's a lot of that, but people, if you just looked at the talent, there were people that thought he was a day 2 talent. So, I see a big opportunity potentially with Cam Akers and behind a bad offensive line. Cam Akers maybe not necessarily having the 100% juice that he once had before tearing that Achilles. I could definitely see a world where Zach Evans gets some starting weeks at the end of the season, but I don't want to go too far on that. Like you said, certainly some work ethic issues.
Yeah, it's not the talent at all. The talent is there. The talent has always been there, but he just seems to get beat out everywhere and never really, like Cody would say, doesn't have the dog in him. And that's going to be a problem in the NFL. I see a lot of DeAndre Swift in him where he's got the talent. He's going to do some things, but it's just going to be, he's never hard enough to play in the NFL. He's not a Dan Campbell guy. That's for damn sure. All right, Emerson. Well, thank you again for joining me. You want to take a chance here to tell everyone where they can find your work?
Yeah, you can follow me below on Twitter at dynasty_analyst. And, we were chatting about it. We work together at Player Profiler. You can check it out. I'm going to try to have an article out there every week going forward. And I will be doing some social media stuff for them as well. I still, of course, do an SGPN podcast every week with my partner, Justin Bruni. You can catch that out on Sundays. And then I also pop on the Face Off Sports Network a few times a week and do a podcast, the Cocktail Hour Fantasy Football Podcast, where I mix some bartending.
You there, Emerson?
I'm back. Am I
Oh,
back?
yeah, you froze. I heard cocktail hour and then you froze, and I said,
oh,
shit, have I had too many cocktails? I think he froze on me.
Well, I'm back. My internet apparently has had too many cocktails, but so yes, if you didn't catch that Cocktail Hour Fantasy Football Podcast, I mix some bartending. I mix a little bit of fantasy football knowledge. It's a bunch of fun, so check me out there too.
Well, this has been my tiers on the rookie running backs with Emerson Beery. Once again, I am Aaron St. Dennis, the FF Mad Scientist, and this has been the Mad Science Lab podcast. Thanks again to Emerson for joining me, and thank you all for tuning in. Take care.